Hola, good morning. Welcome to my channel Clear Vision, the place where you can find lots of videos with practical use psychology, which you can apply to your everyday life. And there's also stuff here if you're going through something more serious, perhaps more intense, some of the things that life could throw our way. There'll be something here for you as well. My name is Simon and I am a psychotherapist, and all the videos here are based on my experience as a therapist, as well as a lecturer and also a human being trying to get through life. I think I'm going to do a series of videos on this. I wanted to start with the effects of disinheritance. It's not a commonplace thing to happen, but it does happen. Disinheritance from a parent. And I'm going to address disinheritance from a parent who died. For a lot of people, it comes as quite a shock to be disinherited. And there are many things that can contribute to this. And there are many things that may have happened along the way. Every case is individual. But I'm going to try and start at a core here. So this is going to go off into lots of strands. Because let's start at base number one. At base number one, we have parent dies and you've been disinherited for some reason. Then we have scenario number two, where you have siblings and they haven't been disinherited. And then you have other scenarios where you've all been disinherited, and then you have scenarios where you were told you were going to be disinherited, and you have scenarios where you haven't been told you're going to be disinherited. And at the very extreme of all of this, you get disinherited, you have no idea why, you didn't know it was happening, everybody else is completely fine and hasn't been disinherited, and none of your family are talking to you anymore. This happens as well to people, and the person who's been disinherited says, hey, you know what, at the center of all of this, it looks like I have done something seriously wrong, because they're no longer talking to me, I've been disinherited and I have no idea why. I look like the bad person here. And that may be the case. Often it's not. There's all these various scenarios. What's happening at the core of all of this is, Freud once said something along the lines of, you truly become a man. I know he was quite male orientated. You truly become a man when you lose your father. I think there was quite a lot of weight in that. You do become an adult when you lose your parents. There's no safety net, there's no fallback. You are at the top of the family tree, as it were, chances are. Hopefully you've got a network around you, a support network. But so where does this go? Where does this leave you? People who have been disinherited or experiencing disinheritance often will suffer with the fallout from this for quite a long time. This can, in fact, maybe the rest of their lives. Especially as often what happens with this is there's no answer that comes with this. There's no reasoning why. And often it's one child who is disinherited and the others are kept in. And there's not a lot of warning for it. It will be prepared for it to strike at the core of your identity, who you are. That's often a very common reaction, and a quick one. Who the hell am I? And who the hell was I to them? Because the person who has raised you, created you, or been part of that creation of you, certainly biologically, has now let you go. And if there's nothing particularly obvious, like, oh yeah, we had this big fallout, there was a big, they were abusive, or I was abusive, or whatever horrible, nasty dynamic may well have gone on, which would explain the disinheritance. Often there's an estrangement in there as well. That doesn't necessarily always answer it either. So it's a difficult one to explore, but the first thing to expect is, or to note that will happen, is you will question your identity and who you are and all your loved ones around you. The second thing to look out for and be aware of is you will probably feel like the villain for quite a long time, but there's often there's no evidence to support this, because you don't actually have the answer as to what's happened and what the other person, what your mother or father was thinking when they disinherited you. So you don't know why they did it. which leads to a natural base conclusion that you must have done something wrong. So you get this kind of villain syndrome for a while. I must be the villain, I must be a bad person. Because what can happen when we, first of all, when we lose a parent, or when we lose a parent and then we're getting disinherited as well, is we could drop into this very kind of like childlike state of mind. This Klein would call it this kind of paranoid schizoid, like it's all good, or it's and therefore I'm all bad, or I'm all good and therefore they're all bad. So we split, we get this schizophrenic split, you know, and it's a defense mechanism against the pain and against what is happening. So it's this is like a common reaction to being disinherited. The first paranoid schizoid split is this kind of like, well, clearly I'm nothing to do with them, so I'm going to change my name. That's one common reaction to it. So I'm going to change my name. Clearly I was not good enough to be their son, daughter, whatever. And then it can flick the other way, as I said. So then there's this, well, they're just a complete asshole and I've done nothing wrong, so I'm amazing and I've been extremely unfairly treated. And that can flick around as well and go, oh, I must be the villain, and they must be all wonderful because obviously the fond memories of them come back in, etc, etc. So it becomes very, very complex, and there's lots of motions that people go through when they are disinherited. And these motions are natural reactions. It's natural and normal to be angry at this, to have this kind of schizoid approach to such a shock or an event in your life, especially if there's no answer, because you're suffering. Not only are you suffering a loss, you're also suffering what many would deem as a betrayal. So your loss on its own can be pretty heavy. Add in betrayal, that's often why people say, like when they get divorced or something, it would have been easier if they'd have died, because then you just deal with loss. But if you deal with loss and betrayal, you're dealing with two very, very heavy things which actually attack you at your core. They take your world out from underneath you. And that is the thing with disinheritance as well. So it's the same with heartbreak, but it's the same with disinheritance. Excuse me, there's flies around here. Disinheritance will whip most of your world out from underneath you and turn your whole world upside down. Hopefully not for too long amount of time, and hopefully with not too detrimental effect, but it can. I've had clients where the effects of being disinherited still are there 20, 30, 40 years later. They take them to their grave. Often, especially if there's not much support and never an answer to it, and sometimes the answer can be quite simple. They just didn't think, or they had an assumption about you that you thought a different way, so they didn't think you this and that and the other, didn't realize the effect, or they've been manipulated along the way into disinheriting you. That can happen as well, especially with other family members. Especially where there's lots of money and assets involved. All sorts of manner of things can come up, but what is most important under all of that material bullshit and everything else is the person being disinherited is dealing with identity struggles. They're dealing with loss, to start with, loss, bereavement, and it's a double loss and bereavement, because not only have you physically lost a person. Let's say you lose your father and they disinherit you. First of all, you've got the grief of losing your father and the image you had of your father. Now you have a second image of your father because they've disinherited you. So now you have this double hit. So you've now got the loss of the relationship you thought you had, the loss of the person you thought you had and you thought they were. Then you've got that betrayal and loss of your own identity for a while. So you begin to lose yourself. This is where you really need to put in your support networks. You really need to look after yourself and take stock. And one thing I always say to people when they're going through emotional stuff is don't react. Wait. It's that kind of thing of, if you can wait 10 minutes before reacting, then wait 10 minutes. If you can wait a week before reacting, then wait a week. If you can wait a whole year, if you can wait 2 years, if you can wait 10 years, take the emotion out of it, think clearly and then act clearly rather than reacting based on your emotion. It's not easy to do, but it does help, especially if you can strive towards it. So you have the actual loss of the parent and who you thought they were and the relationship you had with them, and then you have the betrayal of the disinheritance, and then you have the loss of your own identity because you don't know who you are now. You don't know actually what you meant. All of reality, all of everything that you perceived as a reality is now coming crashing down. If family also make you estranged or ostracize you at the same time, this is quite a common one within this as well. The family don't know how to deal with it, so they put a wall up and go silent for whatever reasons. Guilt, they knew, they didn't know, they're in shock, whatever, they're dealing with their own loss as well. Now you have all of this to deal with as well, so you really do need to look after yourself. And this can again attack your identity. It can make you question the core of who you are. So, and like I say, this is just the first video. So when dealing with the disinheritance, one thing to do when going through all the emotions is accept that you are going to go through these emotions, and these emotions are normal. You're going to be angry, sad, upset, you may be going to rage, I don't know, break things, want to change your name, all of these reactions. But if you can hold it down and work through it, make sure you have your support network there. And then really this is where nearly every video I say this, you come right back to self. Who am I? What do I want? What shape am I forming in the world? Because the more you know this, the more you're able to do this. And once you've formed who you are in the world, it doesn't mean that you can't change, you can't be flexible, but not knowing who you are can often bring so much turmoil, because the world will knock you off your center, which is why I go on about it a lot. So if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you want, you're going to receive chaos. You're going to, every time someone comes along and transgresses you, it's going to knock you off your center. If you know who you are to a point, and you're always looking at who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, you have this kind of, not really self-assured, but a healthy level of self-assuredness, a healthy level of self-love and self-knowledge, self-awareness. When the world transgresses you, which it will do, it's not going to knock you completely off center. It's going to shake your foundations. It might shake you a bit. You might be a few bits fall off you, you know, if you think of yourself an old building, but you're not going to fall down. You're not going to collapse. Disinheritance is one of those things which can really rock even the most self-aware and self-governing of people. It can really shake people to their core. This is something more than just being disinherited by a parent. This is bloodlines, core, childhood stuff, all comes flying forward. So be aware of it, seek out the correct support, learn to express yourself, and keep doing the work on yourself and moving forward. Keep being as objective as possible when you need to be. That brings a lot of strength. Stay aware of not reacting, really that conscious effort of not completely reacting. And if you need to cut contact with certain people, then do that. This is really a time where you really need to shape who you are and look after you. Not to the point of abusing everybody else in your world, but really looking after yourself. So I'm going to do a series of videos on this, I think, because it's an interesting topic and quite a stark one. So in the meantime, I hope that helps, and in the meantime, please take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.